Okay, so it is, again, my pleasure really to welcome everyone who's here with us and this esteemed group of panelists. I just want to say a couple words and hand it over that as we are moving from the KOSANBA conference at the end of August and into the Haitian Studies Association conference at the end of October, we were thinking about the synergy between our themes dealing with ideas of restitution, of reparations, of resistance and rejuvenation. And we began a conversation about how can we think about liberation in a wide framework beyond political or economic frameworks, and think about finding places of belonging like the Lakou in Haiti and in many places beyond the island. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mambo Dr. Kira Daniels for formal introductions.
Thank you so much. Bonsoir tout le monde. Bonsoir tout le monde dans la cour.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Aïe, Bobo.
Bonsoir, bonsoir.
Bonsoir, bonsoir.
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 So we are thrilled to be joining you all in conversation, in dialogue, and yes, in sacred community this evening. My name is Mumbo Dr. Kira Malika Daniels, and I am so thrilled to be in conversation this evening with all of you, and also with two very special big sister aunties in my life who are formidable scholars and practitioners of the Lakou. And when I say that, I mean these are scholars, activists, religious leaders, and mentors who know what it means to institution build across nations, and who also know what it means to not simply network, but to build community and to establish Lakou wherever they go. We're not going to spend a long time with formal introductions, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is really a delight to welcome Dr. Cécile Axelien joining us from the University of Maryland, and Ia Locha Madre Nkisi, Dr. Yannick Hume joining us from even further from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, Barbados. So please join me in warmly welcoming them with some hearts and some confetti on your virtual screens. In the words of my beloved sister Yafun Lyle, she would say some ashe fingers, all of this. And I'm going to ask Yalocha Yannick to lovingly open us with a song or a prayer, one that just comes from the heart before we begin.
Blessings and greetings, honor and respect to all who are present, to the invisible and invisible worlds, and all those who are joining us in this blessed day, in this blessed evening. Thanking you all who have come in the company to share in this knowledge, recognizing that we all stand as pillars, that three-legged chair of which we are all seated to receive the knowledge and to receive the wisdom and to share in community things that have been deposited in us through our own experiences at the base of the sacred trees, hearing the stories on these lands that hold our cords, these lands that hold our bones, these lands that cultivate our food, these lands that give us a space of respite from the period of enslavement to the period of now in the creation of these sanctuaries, and sanctuaries that extend well beyond the sanctuary of the fields of which many of our ancestors first called home. And so as we are here today, we call on their presence. We're calling on the energies that hold us together in community, even though we're across many lands, across many perhaps time zones, that we are able to be knitted together in this sacred space as we share in the company of each other. Aye, Bobo.
Aïe, Bobo. Ashe.
Hey, Bobo.
With that, I'm going to begin. I think it's always helpful to begin with definitions, My students, and I see some of you all here, so welcome, bienvenue. Know that I like to begin with key terms because even if we think we have shared definitions, it's helpful to be on the same footing with regards to what it is we are discussing. So allow me to open the floor for Dr. Axilien and Dr. Hume to share what is the Lakou. I'll note briefly here that this is an image that was created by Tambou Labou and redrawn by architect and Haitian studies scholar Irene Brisson, who warmly introduced us and welcomed us. I think it's a very powerful image. So let me invite my colleagues to share first, what is a lakou? What is the yad?
Can we share the projection? We're not seeing your
Well,
slide.
that would be very important to do. Yes, let me try to do that. Okay, let's see. Here we are. Okay, yes. And here we are. Okay.
Voila.
All right. And so, what is the Lakou with the images?
Lakou, if we were to distill it into one word, Lakou could be home.
Mm.
And within that, all that is kind of grounded in this idea of what home represents. It's important that we don't see it as static because we know that home moves wherever we move. So Lakou is also mobile as a way that we could begin to explore and feel it through in our meditations here this evening.
Thank you so much.
When I think of Lakou, of course, from the French la cour, but it means so much
Yeah.
and yet so simple. It's this idea of home that Yannick mentioned, but it's also, to me, it means conbite, it means rassemblage, which are some of my other Haitian Creole words. Because for me, when I think of Lakou, it's an embodiment of care, connection, and community.
Yeah. It's a space of la famille, a space of collectivity, recognizing that family in the definitions are not only those that share blood, but those who serve together in terms of serve the loi together, those who work together collectively, those who come to that space for that sense of grounding. So within that, it envelops a philosophy that has been part of the ways in which our ancestral kin afforded us this sense of, if we could use a term, of re-territorializing, of replanting ourselves after displacement, coming back to the land to ground and to reroot, literally, to tie ourselves into this land. And we did it not only through occupation of the land, sometimes through capture. This idea of capture land, when we hear some of the songs of even contemporary artists who speak about this idea of taking the land, or through land that has been granted to us, whether through churches like the Baptist Church, have a long history of that land that we cultivated and over time became our own because we've worked that land that have been taken out of circulation because we plant our dead in that land. We have our umbilical cords in that land. So this idea of Lakou is really a container of so many of the rites and passages of our own journeys in this lifetime, but it also links us to the time before this time.
So well said. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think what's so powerful about this particular image is it portrays that the Lakou is widely encompassing of communities as Dr. Axilien, as Dr. Hume have said, this is not only inclusive of biological family members, but also members of a network, neighbors who have become kin, and friends who have become part of a larger intimate circle. And the Lakou as a sacred community here incorporates a kaimiste along with a peristyle being a temple, a voodoo temple, a kaimiste often being a humble abode that includes at times personal family devotional goods and can be a site where the family will go and salute the spirits and salute the ancestors. And a cimetière is very important here because, as Dr. Hume was indicating, there are ways in which African descendants have had to undergo a process of re-indigenizing. While we are not indigenous to the Americas, to say so would be to displace Taino peoples and Kalinago peoples and so many other of the hundreds and thousands of indigenous peoples of the Americas. But we did have to undergo a process of re-indigenizing, right? And that has been taking place for 500 years. And so as part of that process, people on the land that they could call home or that they needed to call home could bury umbilical cords to root their children to the earth and could also bury the dead in a family cemetery that would become part of that sacred community. And so a Lakou is also deeply intergenerational. And I know that that's something that we have lost sight of and have lost track of in Western conceptualizations of home, not only because the nuclear family is defined in such a narrow fashion, but also because we've lost often this component of intergenerational living that has been a major part of global communities' livelihoods for so long. So with that, we thought it would also be helpful to share a few images taken by some of our very own panelists of what a Lakou can look like. We'll see a number of different images over the course of our time together this evening. But this is a portrait in Jamaica, and Dr. Hume will also be speaking not only about the Lakou in the context of Haiti and Haitian culture, but about the Yad, and about this concept of sacred community, land, and home and familial space, intimate sites of belonging in the context of the Anglophone Caribbean. Oh, reload. Let's see. All right. Well, we did not propitiate Baba Eshu. So let us do so right
Bonjour, Timon.
now. Let's drop a bit of glue, jeter de l'eau, and see whether to reload for us. So perhaps it looks like I thought I was going to be in control of the slideshow, and perhaps not. If we come into one more problem, I might ask one of our administrators to serve as point person. So for now, let me say this, that our interest here was in showing you that Alaku can look so many different ways in different communities, but that the natural landscape is an integral part of the Laku. And we would be remiss if we did not incorporate the significance of the water and the trees and the hillside and the swamps and the mud that is all a part of the Laku, which is a community. And if we are thinking expansively about the notion of Laku and community, then we know that it is not simply people, but also animals and sentient beings such as plants that are part of this sacred community and Laku. We're going to see whether this video is going to work for us, but I'm now going to turn the floor over to Dr. Cécile Axilien, who will share with us several sets of insights about the Lakou, and we will have her begin with song. Let me see if this works first. Okay, good.
Ka vle tou fè wè fòs souffle lâche ou. Mais on sait qui nan mon yo rivière yo ka sauve ou. Dans la cour, bois associé, veille la ligne pleine pour gérer causer à la maman pour jeter café pour terri nan plaqué et la fois où plétage tout marqué collé mais l'autre bord rivière à soleil capelé côte l'ombri côté reggae tout ça pour faire géant dans la cour ouais associé veille la ligne pleine pour gérer causer à l'embarras j'étais
Thank you. So I'll just point out to a few keywords from this song, which you can find on YouTube and you can get a translation. It's not super accurate, but what I love about this song is that it highlights our connection to the Lakou, and it focuses on the various type of healing leaves that you can find. And as I was listening to them, Vevena, So Si, it took me back to my own childhood growing up in Savannette in the Central Plateau, where whatever ill I will have, there was some type of leaves that my parents will use to help. And till this day, when I have a cold, as many of you who knows me know, it's ginger and cinnamon, real ginger, real cinnamon and lime. And those bring such powerful memories of childhood, but also my connection to my Haitianness. So that's what I'll say about this song. So I want to read this poem by Soni Toneme. And coincidentally, last week, Soni came to my university to give a talk as a poet, to do a reading. And honestly, I wasn't even thinking about the connection to our program today on the Lakou. And interestingly enough, there are no coincidences. He's going to be talking at the Haitian Studies Association opening ceremony in a couple of weeks. So I'll read this to you because, again, I love the word kombit. I love the word just as much as I love the word Lakou and rassemblement. Kombit by Soni Toneme. The women lead the way with their skirts tied up their bellies, stomping the ground, shaking big buttocks. 50 choppers drumming in the air. The hosts of the men lost their sound under the rumbling of the elders' chant. And the clamor, la woman's voice comes on uninvited. Sambae, sambae, sambae. Samba comes, tambour in hands, a little oilier than his front. Drunk, the voices stammers, a hammer hitting cardboard. Nothing left here except for an urge. Creature of habit, he sticks his tongue out when he approaches the boys. The girls look him down, witches of another time. La woman invigorates delicate men. Sambae, sambae, sambae. Men with asthma complain too much, live on the communion of brotherhood. Stumps begging for flowers on dry soil. That morning, one rooster forgot to crow and a man lost his ass. There are pebbles in his rice. La woman crunches her pillows under her armpits, lowers her voice, begs to differ, and whispers, Sambae, sambae, sambae. The children fill the holes with handfuls of corn. It is life. Men dig holes. Children occupy them. And women mend the world. 1, 2, 3. They stop the dance when the drums start their rolling. Bellies gurgling, calling out for intermission. She goes, sambae, sambae, sambae. I do not exist without my various Lakou. My Lakous run far and deep. They are both personal and professional. As the mother of a 15-year-old black boy, and as someone who is currently at my 5th plantation, those of you who are not traditional academics may not realize that I am referring to the various universities in which I have taught. All have been predominantly white institutions. I have had to create my Lakou by necessity, not by choice necessarily. However, I am blessed because the Lakous I have created in these various spaces have helped me remain whole and healthy when I have faced racism, sexism, and other ism. And let's be clear, I have dealt with that at 4 of the 5 institutions. I'm too new at the 5th one to know yet. So what I did is I came up with, I'm hesitant to call it a poem because there may be real poets in the audience. I will call it some thoughts about my reflection in the Lakou, the importance of the Lakou for me, and what it means to me. Because, as I say, I do not exist without my Lakou. Before I read my thoughts, a concrete example is how when I was interviewing for the current job where I am, I had Kira Daniels, who's here, Claudine Michel, Regine Jackson, who got together, not only listen to me practice my job talk, and I remember Kira helping me make my presentation beautiful, because that's not one of my strengths. You know, and this is part of an example of my Lakou. There has always been time also when I have had to travel to go to conferences, whether it was my partner or some of these friends when I was in Atlanta, I will call upon them, drop Zahir at their house, my son Zahir, so that they can take care of him. So my Lakou is very real. It's not something that one talked about. It's not an intellectual thing that we read about. It's real. So I will read my thoughts. My Lakou is everywhere. My Lakous are sources of power. Jete de l'eau nan Lakou a. Re les ancêtres yo ak invisible yo pou yo fè nou jam. I exist through the Lakou. It takes me to my childhood in Savannette, where I was loved and felt cared for in so many ways. These memories are ingrained in me. Body, spirit, mind, and soul. My body remembers. The Lakou is power. The Lakou is memory. Wherever I am, wherever I go intentionally, I create my Lakou because it makes me feel complete. My Lakou is my Ubuntu. I am because you are. We are one in the Lakou. Mwen connecté ak l'esprit yo. Tout moun se moun nan Lakou a. I do not have just one Lakou. I have many Lakou. My Lakous keep growing. I am a connector. I cannot live without my Lakous. They are everywhere I am. And my Lakou is where my people are. We understand one another. We do not need to have a lot of conversation to know what we need from one another. We share similar pains. We carry the same scars. We have the same rage and anger. We embody similar futures. Lakou mwen yo se kombit, se rassemblage, se balance, se force ak konesans. Se la nou ka jwen sagesse parol zanset yo. Lakou a se sous benediksyon sou tout forme. Lakou mwen tout patou. Lakou mwen se nam mwen, se force mwen, se l'esprit mwen. My Lakous are everywhere. Savannette, Delma 18, Newark, Lafayette, New Orleans, Portland, Columbus, Puerto Rico, Half Moon Bay, Lawrence, Kennesaw, Atlanta, Greenbelt, College Park, Oujda, Madrid, Burkina Faso, Martinique. My Lakous allow me to survive the various plantations in which I have lived and worked, where I have found sister scholars, people who started off as colleagues. They became friends and they are now family, my chosen family. In my various Lakou, I find my strength and my identity. My Lakous are everywhere I am and everywhere I go. Inside my house, inside my office, when I talk to friends on the phone or Zoom, being in combat with friends, learning with my students and colleagues, working in nature. Parole nou pa jam fini, parole nou gen pied zel. Nan Lakou mwen yo, gen pile femme vanyan ak gason jam ki sorti tout patou. My Lakou is as diverse as the rainbow, as fluid as la sirene and Ezili. They are people of all colors and all beliefs. In de Lakou you find l'amour, l'amitié, la joie, la paix. De Lakou is not simply this idyllic and romantic place. It is a place of constant learning, where you are challenged and being challenged by others, where you can hold two completely opposite truths at the same time. Sometimes there is discomfort, but in the space of discomfort is where the most intense and powerful learning takes place. Lakou mwen se la mwen ka rekolte kompasyon ak l'amour. De Lakou is also a place of comfort and simplicity. De Lakou is home. You know when you're in the right Lakou. It's not a formula, it's a feeling. You feel the power of the Lakou. You embody that feeling of well-being, that feeling of home. Lakay se lakay. Lakou yo se nanan mwen, se la mwen rêve. Se la mwen senti mwen bien. Mwen joun repos. Mwen ka retire tout vie masque que société a poussé mette. Masque capitaliste, masque raciste, masque sexiste. Nan Lakou a mdi, aba tout masque. And my Lakou is where I find my people, my friends, my colleagues, people with whom I can speak about everything and nothing in Creole, English, Krenglish, Franglais, or French. In my Lakou, we have to give and take with care. That is one of the fundamental rules of the Lakou. We must pay it forward, not in any specific and linear way, but rather in a way that makes sense. In the Lakou, we learn that nous fait pour nous mourir. We are born to die. We treasure life because we know nous tout c'est la vie, mais c'est passé n'a passé. We are all smoke. We are just passing through. My Lakou is filled with abundance. My Lakou is all the places I imagine my futures. My Lakou is where I can be my full self, courageous, brave, unapologetically. I am limitless. Ay, bobo.
Wow.
And I have two pictures I want to show, well, three. So as I've said, I've moved a lot. I think my family has accepted. I'm at my first institution. I've lived in Portland, Oregon, Columbus, Georgia, Lawrence, Kansas, Kennesaw / Atlanta, Georgia, and now I'm in college. I'm in Greenbelt, Maryland, where I teach in College Park. So I've had to recreate my Lakou. As many of you know, I'm a walker. That's how I also survive my stress. And so this is a picture of my campus that I took today. We have the Do Good Institute. And many of you know Thurgood Marshall. I won't get into the details, but he's from Maryland. So this institute is named after him. And when I walk, usually before I teach, I walk around, I pass by the Do Good Institute. I am also reminded that I am where I am because of my various Lakou, and I have responsibility. But they also strengthen me because it's a reminder that I am not alone. And the next slide is a statue of Frederick Douglass. When I came for my interview, that was one of the big selling points. And at the time I had forgotten that Frederick Douglass was from Maryland. And I will walk around that statue. I will think about the connection. I will think about the work that people like Frederick Douglass did to get me to be where I am today. So I embrace and claim Frederick Douglass as someone who's part of my Lakou.
Mm.
And near the statue of Frederick Douglass, there are all these wonderful quotes there, but the quote that I want to leave with you is the quote that says, education means emancipation. And for me, in the Lakou is where I have received the most important education in my life. It's not the education that maybe that I got in my PhD reading these books, but the Lakou helped me get my PhD. And so I want to leave with that quote, education means emancipation. To me, the Lakou is about freedom. It's about getting education constantly as a circle. Thank you. Aibobo.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing these reflections. And yes, I dare say this poem with us, this inspiring poem, along with song, we wanted to keep things dynamic for you all. So we're going to continue on our journey with images and song and perhaps some more prayer along the way. And with that, I will share the stage and cede the floor to Dr. Yum.
Thank you so much. As we look at this, we come to this world and we enter into our Lakou through the back door of our land. And when it is time for us to say goodbye, we are at the front. This will make sense as you see these images. And I start with this one because in the distance and in the foreground are fruit-bearing trees of which our umbilical cords lie. There are 3 generations of cords on this land, and our placentas are under the door, under the main house. But this is what we call a yard space. It's also what we would call our Lakou. And I start with this reflection, and I'm reminded that I am indeed a student of the late Michel Roth-Trio, who always instilled in me the importance of comparative work, the importance of seeing Haiti through the lens of a wider cosmos that includes the various islands that dot the archipelago of which I reside. And so I'm always in conversation through the vantage point of centering Haiti, but also seeing how does Haiti show up in spaces that we may not imagine. How do we see ourselves as a diasporic force that share in a philosophy, share in an ideology, share in a process of world making? And I would indeed say that Lakou's is a process of world making, a process of using the little that you would have had, however small, however large, and in that process of rooting, really beginning to say, we are of here. And what my dear colleague and sister and Dr. Mambo Kira shared with us, this idea of thinking through what does it mean to plant your child's cord underneath a fruit-bearing tree of which you too will reside. And that process is that we know the responsibility we have to this land, even though many generations would have left it, whether through migration or through the day-to-day movement or through transitioning through death. But we recognize that this land and the maintenance of lineages marked on this land are maintained by the living in perpetuity. It was an ingenious process. We have many scholars who've really took the time to tease through this history of land tenure, this history of claiming land as part of our own, as part of a process of Lakou making, as part of a process of making a world of which we were the agents of our destinies, the agents of what would come. And I bring to this idea of what does it mean to come through the back door? In actual fact, because children are seen as babies, infants, the closest to the realm of the ancestral, they are the most vulnerable. And so they are protected from the gaze of the public. And so you enter through your back door, oftentimes without people knowing you've given birth. It's a very private thing. However, in death, you are the most public and things shift. So on this, we just see several of the trees, and we see this is a land that is in cultivation. It's a land that also produces yam, that grows citrus. It's a land that grows also breadfruit and other root crops that have been the sustenance, not only for nutrients, but also for giving opportunities for laborers to labor on that land as well. Next slide. And as we proceed to the next slide, we just have a sense of the vista of what it means to walk through, to traverse. One of the things that anthropologist Sidney Mintz brought to our attention very early on, I would say in his writings of the late 1950s through 60s, he was one of the first voices coming from a North American context to really speak about Caribbean peasantries and the importance of this idea of what he terms reconstituted peasantries, recognizing that much of the literature, much of the scholarship around land and land use and the various genealogies that were done within the discipline of anthropology centered their work on societies that were cast as quote unquote primitive in quotes. So we had the work coming out of Southern Africa, West Africa, East Africa, trying to make sense of how are these people living this idea of the compound. And in many ways, the compound, the African family compound, replicates itself in this context of the diaspora, in the context of the Americas, the Black Atlantic, in these spaces that we call plots. What Sylvia Winter draws our attention to in terms of this distinction between what we would call the plantation, of which we all know, but those who either escaped into the hills and formed their palenques, their quilombos, their maroon settlements, and those who irked out these spaces of freedom, relative freedom within these satellite interstices of the plantation, and creating creating a moment of rehumanizing. So when we're talking about this idea of rooting and becoming indigenous to the land, by rooting ourselves to the land, this is very much a part of our humanizing process of reclaiming what we always knew to be true, but having it have an operational, tangible reality where we could actually have our feet on the soil and have the fruits of which we have sowed and the other vegetables and products that we have sowed to be able to give that to us. So when we think about replanting and this idea of the rehumanizing and the indigenizing, that is all processes of Lakou and world making that extends itself even when we're looking at sites that may not be a rural site that we see here. And as we go forward, we think through, again, this idea of space. So in the work of Mintz, Sidney Mintz, he, in his early kind of thinking through of this, he pretty much separated house and plot. And he has a famous essay called House and Plot. It's been reproduced in many volumes on the Caribbean. And this idea of the domesticity of the house and the openness of the plots and how these two spaces coexist. But there are many spaces in the Lakou, many spaces in the yard that falls outside of plot, because when he was speaking of plot, he was actually speaking principally around what we would call the spaces of cultivation. But as we saw in that first slide, the plot is divided into many different ways. There are very specific spatial dimensions to Lakous, and we know who and where and what moves through these spaces, what offerings are placed at the base of trees, for example, who ventures into the areas, for example, where there is the pit toilet or the latrine, the areas where there's the kitchen. Many of the homes within rural Jamaica, this is the site of Manchester, Chantilly, Manchester, wouldn't have, even in modern times, wouldn't necessarily have while they may have a toilet and a bathroom in the house, they recognize, my grandmother would say, one doesn't shit and eat in the same place. And I use that because she would use that quote unquote profanity. But the idea of the crassness of that act occupied a space outside of where you ate or slept. So in many of these spaces, these very simple spaces, there were outdoor kitchens, outdoor bathrooms, outdoor, and then you have your cultivation sites and your house where you would meet people. So again, recognizing that there's a spatial dimensionality to these yard spaces, these Lakou spaces, and they're sacred spaces that may exist as a building, a structure like a peristyle, or as a tree, or as a group, a grove of trees, or as a river that runs through in certain sections that may not be as visible, as a wetland or a swamp area. So these spaces become imbued with the sacred in many ways. In the context of Jamaica, young people in rural Jamaica, young meaning toddlers, if someone transitioned before they reached the age of 5, they often were not buried in tombs. They were planted in the earth because they didn't reach the fullness of their cycle. So their bodies would be wrapped in cloth and placed in the earth, and then at the base of a tree, oftentimes a ceiba. So this land actually has areas, oftentimes a grove. If there was any younger person who would have transitioned, they would be placed at the base of a tree. And these aren't necessarily marked by, they're not marked by signage, but they're marked by energy. They're marked by those who occupy and move through these spaces, because these spaces are also gendered, very much so, in terms of who have access and works the different spaces in this land, right? So who is cultivating, and in a difference that I could say that's quite marked in, let's say, a Haitian context and a Jamaican context, is that much of the cultivation, that hard labor of growing, of harvesting and of planting is done by men, right? And then you would have the women in certain satellite spaces, but it shifts, because I was going to say women are often cooking, but it depends. Ceremonial food is cooked by men, not by women, because they couldn't necessarily ask whether a woman is on her menses, and ceremonial food cannot have the heat of menstrual blood. So when it comes to ceremony, to avoid having to deal with that, men actually cook. But generally, you would have that demarcation of the women who works in the kitchen outdoors, the men who are pulling and working through the soil. There are women who also are growing certain things like ginger, coffee. There are certain crops that you would find. So these spaces have a gender dimension as well, that I think is something that is, we could think about as we explore further, as we go through. And kombit, this idea of the collective leva, that the land itself is worked. In Jamaica, we use the term to hold sport, keep in sports, keep a sport. And when you keep a sport, it means you are inviting everyone who is able-bodied to come. You would have, so this gentleman here who is with the cap, the gray cap sitting, he's about, when I took this photo, he's 92. Yeah, so you have a full gamut of, and I find workers of the land, they live long. Some of them live there's a certain longevity to their existence. And part of it is that sense of sharing, that one hand make many hands, one cocoa fill basket. All of our parables and proverbs that speak to this principle of collective labor and all that we do. So in holding a sport, food is cooked. What you provide for the laborers are food and alcohol, not the finest of kinds, the most, can we call it babouche or jankrabati? It's like raw rum, clarine, and providing that for the laborers along with food, good company. As we move on to the next slide, the idea of having this opportunity to break bread together and sharing in that moment of telling stories, the learning, the training that happens. There's oftentimes a young kid or a younger man who is instructed, no, don't do that there, but do that. So that space of learning and holding and passing on, and that an important space of an expression of a masculinity that is about cooperation, a masculinity of which one teaches one, a masculinity of which there is a sense of holding each other up in community and being each other's keepers. Now, all of these men are also masons, not of the Masonic order, but masons in terms of house builders, but they are also grave diggers. So there's that recognition that you too will bury me. And so that sense of holding that space, because you are going to be the one that constructs my last home. And when we go to this idea of the last home and this idea of holding space, we recognize that within the Lakou yard spaces in many of the areas in the Caribbean, we also hold our departed. It is a space of which our deceased also occupy. So part of the dimensionality of that, and this is in the front yard. So one enters into a typical yard by greeting the dead first. The trees of which hold our navel strings are in the back, but our ancestors always hold front, in the recognition that we come from the depth of the Kalunga to make ourselves visible to the fullness and then come back around. So we greet our dead first, alongside the home. And it's a way that you pay homage to the presence of all those lineages that would have allowed this family line to exist. And long after the many exist, the trees hopefully will still stand, and the many who are rooted in the soil through their tunes will stand as well. Thank you very much.
Ay, Bobo and Ashe.
She.
It feels so fitting to follow my elders as we think about the importance of conversations across time, space, region, and indeed generations. In part because we recognize that there are several themes that have emerged that we're all discussing. And so I think that if we consider the ways that a Lakou offers fruit to bear and gardens that bloom and harvests to cultivate, we recognize that the Lakou ultimately is about replenishment and nourishment, mind, body, and spirit. And so I thought that as we have each spoken from different positionalities, Dr. Axelien as a literary theorist, cultural studies scholar, Dr. Hume very much also an anthropologist of religion or an ethnographer of religion. I know I shy away from the term anthropologist, but comparative sacred arts scholar and cultural studies scholar. I wanted to share with you all some of the visual representations of Lakou that I find especially moving and that I use in my teaching, and also to help me understand these concepts and these philosophies in deeper ways. So, if we're going to speak about the Lakou, we have to begin by talking about Lakou as a site of liberation. In many ways, Dr. Axelian began us in this orientation and even concluded her remarks with thinking about the emancipation that comes from education and the liberation that comes from freeing oneself from bondage. Maonage. Every good Haitian knows Maonage is our key to understanding different aspects of liberty. So Wakaima was a political congress, it was a religious ritual, and it was a Pan-African alliance of nations. On August 14th, 1791, this gathering occurred and was led by those such as Dati Boukman and Cécile Fatima, who have been identified in many different ways. Dati Boukman actually hailing from the continent via Jamaica. And it is said that his name came about, as common lore would have it, because he was Muslim. And so Boukman was man of the book. There are some things, that people contest about this. What we know is that he played an extremely pivotal role as one of the leaders of the Boakaima ceremony and Congress. Alongside him was Cécile Fatima, clearly somebody who has at times slipped through the cracks of history narration, because we know the ways that women and genderqueer folks are erased from history. But Cécile Fatima was very likely of Creole descent, meaning of mixed African and European heritage. She was identified often as a priestess of voodoo. While we cannot be certain about their religious roles that they played, we recognize the ways in which they served as political leaders and spiritual leaders. And so in this site of the Lakou, which at the time in 1791 was really an important gathering of different peoples. You had Maroons who had created autonomous societies and who had escaped slavery. You had enslaved Africans and some people who were freed people of color who all banded together and said, we must fight for our liberation from France and fight until the death. A pact was made with the spirits to ensure that the new citizens of this republic to be formed would fight with the fortitude and the strength of the spirits and the ancestors by their sides. And so this took place in a site known as Boakaima. Kaima is a Taino word meaning alligator, meaning crocodile. And so the literal translation of Boakaima is the woods or the forest of the crocodile. Now, I am not a, scholar of animal studies, but I imagine that many of you understand that crocodiles don't typically live in woods. They live in swamps, right? And so it's possible that this was indeed a swampland. It's possible that this was a marsh nearby a forest. What we know is that this gathering was a site of possibility that took place in a Lakou. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we can't, there's no way we can do this without telling this story. So let's see. Shall we ask somebody to take over slides if this is not loading? Because we got to have that image.
Here, I can do it.
Thank you, Irene. I'm troubling you. Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
And we're at slide 25.
Okay, you see it?
It is loading thinking and we're in. Thank you, Irene. Thank you. So if we are going to talk about Caribbean history, if we're going to talk about the Lakou as a site of healing, we also have to recognize the ways in which it has served as a site of trauma. So the anti-superstition campaigns of the 1880s, the 1890s, the 19 teens, 20s, and 30s were brutal eras of repression and religious brutalization. This is a portrait by Ernst Prophète, who has depicted the anti-superstition campaign of 1927, which was part of a larger Marine occupation, the U.S. Marine occupation between 1915 and 1934 in Haiti, was really a devastating time for Haitians and for Vaudouisans, Vaudou devotees of this African heritage religion. In this work, you can see that people are being forced by missionaries, priests, and by members of a gendarme collective or the police force to burn their sacred implements. And some are doing so under duress. In the bottom right corner, you might see the blue coat of somebody who is escaping. And I choose to regard that as somebody who is choosing marronage, as somebody who is fleeing from this violence with their ritual goods in arm. Next slide, please. The Lakou as a site of trauma is not simply a historical event. It is something that is ongoing. And scholars such as Dr. Rachel Cantave and Dr. Danielle Boaz have done such formative and important work on the concept of religious racism. And I want to note here that one of the things that they underscore is that religious racism is a term that they did not coin themselves, but rather is one introduced by Candomblé devotees of Brazil. And the term religious racism is supposed to identify not simply religious prejudice, not simply racism, but the experience of religious oppression because that heritage is coming from a particular ethnic group, a particular nation, a particular culture. And so Candomblé devotees, in identifying themselves as experiencing religious racism, recognize the ways that they are persecuted because Candomblé is an African-derived religion. Vodou devotees are persecuted because Vodou is an African heritage religion. Obia, Kumina, Mial, revivalists are persecuted. Spiritual Baptists are persecuted because they practice African ancestral traditions. In December 2024, there were almost 200 people who were massacred in Haiti, in Croix-des-Bouquets. This was an act of violence incited by a gang leader who felt convicted in this act of aggression because his son was ill. He sought help from a priest, and his son was not able to recover and eventually transitioned. And so what happens when we misplace our anger and our rage against spiritual leaders who are trying to work towards healing? What happens when the Lakou becomes a site of trauma? Well, we must seek different forms of restitution. Next slide, please. I'm echoing here both what my fellow panelists have shared in part about the Lakou as a site of collective labor. In many ways, Kombit is a gathering of folks to do work that could, in theory, be done alone, but could feel an impossible burden if not in community. And so a Kombit as a collective labor force is the gathering of people to build a house, to clear land, to build a set of graves, to harvest the crops that are ready. And what is important to know about Kombit is that it does not happen dry. It happens with music, it happens with song, it happens with libations being poured, good, strong sips, clairin being offered not only to the spirits, but also being imbibed. And the host family who is organizing a Kombit would be responsible for housing the community who has come to participate in this collective labor, for feeding this community, for providing them nourishment and providing them fortitude through things like song. So Gaga bands will often come in Haiti and perform during Kombit, during the rites of this collective labor. And so a site that might arguably look quite secular is in fact a sacred communal gathering to conduct a work that would be quite difficult to do alone and is accomplished with so much more vigor and power and strength in collectivity. Next slide, please. I also want to discuss the Lakou as a site of community feasts. You know, there are so many misrepresentations and misconceptions that Vodou and other African-derived religions are religions of blood, animal sacrifice. And I think that I've realized one of the most helpful tools to explain the concept of offerings is by asking people what they know and understand of kosher and halal practices of Jewish and Muslim communities. In both Judaism and Islam, the understanding is that one consumes food that has been ritually prepared. And that is especially true when we are asking animals to give their life to sustain and feed us. So with kosher and halal practices, one must pray over the animals. One must ensure that the animal has not suffered tremendously or in excess. And certain portions are reserved for people to eat. Certain portions are regarded as taboo. These are all things that take place in the Lakou as well, and in the practice of Africana traditions as well. Animals are prayed over, they are ritually bathed, they are beseeched for permission to give their life. And the beautiful spreads of food that people will see on altars are not just for show. People who live in insecure or food insecure communities, as is unfortunately too often the case in many of our Caribbean and African homelands, and sometimes in the United States as well, of course, know that coming to ceremony means they will receive a feeding. They will get a hot plate of food because no one can be turned away. So in calling a ceremony a dance, you identify a ritual activity that takes place. In calling a ceremony a fete, you are calling it a feast because indeed one feasts with the spirits themselves. And this is something that also is in accompaniment with what we call the manger pauvre, the feeding of the poor. That takes place quite frequently in Vodou ceremonies. Again, not something that's often discussed, but the Lakou is a site where people can come to be nourished, body, mind, and spirit. Next slide, please. And ultimately, I think that we have all touched on the ideas of how the Lakou serves as a site of spiritual healing. What I love about this work by Pauleus Vital is the recognition that the community is gathering together for ceremony. We see women in red on the right-hand side. We see drummers on the left. We see congregants of La Place and the sacred sword bearer and the Kodrapo, the sacred carriers of the ritual flags, all processing and partaking of ceremony. Above them, whether this is a basement or an underground world, we see a spirit emerging from a tree, a reposoir, the sacred dwelling of spirit. And this is such a profound image to me because I see and sense that what is taking place in the mortal plane is sustaining the spirits on other sides. Spirits reside underneath the earth as ancestors and also above. They are within our communities. They are outside in the worlds that we do not see. And so this representation of the Lakou as a site of spiritual healing is in recognition that in times of strife, in times of difficulty, in times of crisis and atrocity, people can lose their faith. And that happens quite often. In addition, people can strengthen their faith as a way of recognizing the importance of drawing strength and power from a tradition of healing, from a tradition of ancestral rites. I will ask to go to the next slide as we close out our more formal components of presentation. And please feel free to join me, Dr. Axelien and Dr. Hume, in identifying some of these works. I really do believe that some of these works are quite powerful reminders of the different ways that we embody Lakou in contemporary times as well as historical times. So this is a portrait of Lakou Souvenance in Gonaïve. It's important that we recognize that Vodou has many faces and many regional varieties, as do all of our Africana religions. And so this is true, especially in Haiti, because the Vodou of the urban landscape is not the Vodou of the rural countryside, and the Vodou of the north is not the Vodou of the south. We have powerful connections, and also recognize the distinctions between them. So please feel free to chime in with these works.
Yeah, it's it's a beautiful image as we look at this and see that kind of poignancy of the worlds of the invisible, but also the idea of nature and how that is so pivotal to how we understand how we inhabit space and the vibrations from that. It's like as Dr. Sliem shared with us this idea of knowing when you're home, and recognizing that it is that feeling, that sensation, a quality that's within that feeling. But it's also important, I think, also as we think about, there is a tendency, even in the pictographs, in the photographs, or of the paintings, my bad, to think of Lakou within the space of rurality. But as we saw within Dr. Xlien's presentation, there are also ways in which we could see it digitally, urbanly, that there are ways of which we have to also understand how Lakou exists within the various other spaces. Echoing. Whether it's in a space of gathering, whether it's in the cipher of collective action that happens within these urban spaces as well, whether within a tenement yard, that there are these spaces of which we come together to create and to make.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just struck by the tree,
Yeah.
and a reminder that wherever we are, our roots, we carry some of that with us. And earlier in the beginning, as you were talking about Lakou umbilical cord, it makes me think of the fact that my parents plant a mango tree, well, my dad mainly, for each of the grandkids. Sadly, my son still has not been able to go to Haiti, and every time I kept waiting for things to get better, and he's now 14, but I know his tree, he's connected there. And coincidentally, mangoes are one of his favorite food, and my dad reminds us of that. And the tree reminds me that we are connected somewhere to so many ancestors. And it makes me think of Birago Diop poem that the dead are not dead. Like, when we listen to the voice of the trees, when we listen, and that we are part of something bigger. So this image just really resonate with me.
And the accountability, the accountability in terms of that we must take care of them. Part of why it is a fruit tree is the recognition that it doesn't grow alone, that you must water it, and that it will bear fruit, but you also must take care of it so that you can reap that. And the idea is that everyone could have access to that fruit, to those what gets grown on that land, grown in that space, that it's shared with those who are welcomed in. And hold that space or within that that container. But the taking care is so crucial, whether it is in the watering, whether it's in the offering of a libation, a presentation of a candle, a presentation of coffee, presentation of grains, that these are all the ways in which we recognize source, but we also recognize that like trees, like that it's not just about the human being, but the sentience of all living things that are in that space.
Ay, oo. Next slide, please. I think that's a beautiful way to segue into thinking about the ways in which Lakou becomes different sources of collective power. This is a portrait of an artisanal collective known as Artis Résistance in Port-au-Prince. Some of you may know it quite well. It's been many years since I've been able to return home to Haiti, but I always remember visits to Artis Résistance as a very powerful encounter with what it means to be in an artistic combit, or to bear witness to an artistic combit. This is a gathering of artists who work with found art. And by that, I mean they repurpose recycled goods, metalwork, tires, springs, and fashion artwork from them. They are more working against the idea of fine art only looking one way, artistic production only being made of certain materials. And I think that this is a very powerful response. We also recognize the ways in which so many incredible artistic works that we have encountered are not in fact made by individuals. The Sistine Chapel was not painted alone. It was painted with dozens, if not hundreds, of skilled painters and artisans. And so these are ways in which we recognize that, artistic collectives too function as a Lakou. Next slide, please. I love this image because it's one that if any of you are in New York, you all can visit. I did not choose this image, but it is a site called Lakou Cafe in Brooklyn. So Tati Cecile, would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, I mean, I love this idea again that wherever we are creating our Lakou, and it's also for me, the new generation and the diasporic generation claiming their place, because even if they have never been to Haiti, if they want to claim Haiti to the Ziriakpoa, as my son does, to the food, to the music, Haiti belongs to them as well. They have as much rights. And it also to me speak to the idea post-independence, there's this idea that anyone can be Haitian, because the liberation of Haiti, whether you were black or white, and I think there's this openness, this idea that we really, the whole idea of being the first Black republic, it was a space for everyone, whether you were from Venezuela, whether you were from Greece. And people don't think about how Haiti helped so many other countries to come to the Haitian Lakou in Haiti. And so this makes me think of this idea, and we see it also say plant-based. So if people don't want to eat meat, there's place for you in the Lakou as well. You don't have to. The Lakou is not just one way. As long as you respect the rules of being respectful, of being there to wanting to share with one another, there's place for you in the Lakou. And I love that, because to me, that's what Haiti is and should be about in Haitian culture. So ayi bobo.
Ay, Bobo. Next slide, please. I would be remiss if I did not take an opportunity to salute my elders here and our elders collectively. I know that Ngan Dr. Gildes Fleurin and Madame Florienne Sentil are here with us this evening. Bienvenue, bienvenue. The Lakou also serves as, in addition to a site of sacred knowledge dissemination, it can also be formal education. And here I really want to recognize the work that they've done with the Gawuginu King Foundation in Yobale, the Vodou schools that they have established in Dibisha near Yobale on the route to Sodo. Next slide, please. This has been a project many years in the making. They have created dozens of different satellite institutions, and I recognize that this work has been multi-pronged. It has been incorporative of healing and plant medicines, the power of songs to convey history lessons, the significance of carnaval as a, mobile Lakou, if you will, when everybody joins a collective force to sing, to dance, to cause a bit of mayhem, and also to heal collectively. And so I just want to honor Dr. Fleurin and Madame Saint-Cyr for their long-standing work in so many Lakou and so many communities to uplift and uphold Haitian cultural systems, traditions, and yes, Vodou. Ay, Bobo. Next slide, please. And I'm going to close out with this set of observations, which is that we have identified Lakou as something that is ever evolving. And so, what does Lakou look like for the next generation? It is dynamic. And I am especially inspired by this generation of, I have to say, primarily female artists, though perhaps not exclusively, who are all theorizing and engaging with the concept of Lakou in their music. So this is a song, Pititea by Niska, featuring Danola. It came out in 2018 and features a young girl who is a representative of Haiti, an embodiment of Haiti, as they conceptualize what it is to redefine home in times of difficulty and triumph. Next slide, please. And here I'll move more quickly as we conclude and leave time for questions and conversation. This is an artist, Sansan Kasama, who creates a beautiful song, Bitasyon. Bitasyon is absolutely incorporated in the concept of Lakou. And Bitasyon has different styles of definition. It comes from the French habitation, meaning a place of residence, but also carries specific meanings in the context of Vodou as the site where trees have been planted, a cemetery has been established, a sacred community conducts ceremony, holds gatherings, conducts social convenings. And when we think about these etymologies, shout out to my linguists, including those such as Alexandria Saint-Élien, it's so important that we recognize the multiple linguistic roots even of these terms. Lakou is most often identified as a term coming from the French la cour, meaning courtyard. But there are other scholars, herself included, who are identifying that actually the term Akou is a Fongbe term from Benin, meaning community, courtyard, space of shared collectivity. And so there are ways in which we can even recognize here the different lineages that we share, and that we must acknowledge in claiming proudly an African heritage. Next slide, please. This is a song, Petite Guinée, child of Guinea, child of Africa, but also child of Afrique Guinée, of the ancestral realm, of the spiritual realm, by an artist, Dina FDA and Tani, who have created yet again another reference to Lakou and who are proudly claiming their heritage as Vaudouisans, as Vaudouvi in the video. This is something that still today people can be persecuted for and whose lives can be endangered still today. And so for them to take this claim and to make this road as artists, I think is very powerful. Next slide, please. Perhaps most popularly this year, Riva Niri Presil came out with a song Uve Potla. People made TikTok videos. It went viral. This is very exciting because this is a Haitian born in Haiti, raised in Haiti and the United States. And here I want to add, I think it's very important that we recognize that Vodou is not only practiced by the poor. Vodou is not only practiced by those who are clearly of African descent. Light-skinned Grimel have been practicing Vodou openly and behind closed doors for generations. And so it's important that we recognize too, Vodou continues to thrive in the diaspora. So I think that that's also very significant. Next slide, please. And I want to end here because I think that this is the cutest video ever. It is a small short video clip of the next generation singing a song in honor of Bwakaima and specifically of Bukman. Irene, is it okay if I send it in the chat and people can see it later? But can we play just like a minute of that video? I have it pulled up. It's
Yeah, I could transfer it to you because I do not
Sounds
have the video linked here.
sounds great. So I will send request and share my screen and optimize video and share sound. So we are ensuring. Okay. We'll just do it this way. Ay, Bobo.
Hi, Bobo.
Aïe, Bobo, Ashe.
And with that, we'd love to open it up to questions. And if my fellow panelists have anything that they want to share or to add as we wait for questions to come in, please feel free to do
Yeah, I mean, I had seen a chat, somebody who said that it's because of colonialism or capitalism, it's Lakou, almost like as if Lakou doesn't exist. And I want to challenge that because for me, you have to be intentional. The Lakou is not necessarily going to come to you. And you have to have different Lakou. I mean, I spoke primarily of, a lot of it, my academic Lakou that are both personal and professional. I think of colleagues, literally. I have had to teach a class and I have reached out to Dr. Kira Daniels. I have reached out to colleagues such as Regine Jean-Charles. If I know it's something I need sociology, I will reach out to Dr. Regine Jackson, but you have to be intentional about that too. And I strongly believe in paying it forward. Like, I put in time to students. I continue to mentor students from like 2 universities ago because it's that circle. So I want to challenge that. The Lakou is not just going to come
No.
from the sky. So I'll just stop there. But that's one thing I wanted to say.
And in the same way of which Lacous require maintenance and there's labor, there's intentional labor to sustain it. It doesn't sustain itself just so. And when you're speaking about, it doesn't just come to you. It is about cultivating, it's about creating, it's about being mindful of how you move in that space with each other and recognizing that it's not created just for the now, but that in that paying it forward is already the sense that it has the potential to exist in perpetuity if it should need to, right? So it isn't just about the immediacy, even though it could fulfill certainly the needs and the demands of what is required for the now. The idea is that it's able to then serve for those who are coming after you.
I see we have a question in the chat about, is it common for Haitian Vaudouisans or Vaudouvi? Is it common for devotees to go to Benin as a rite of passage? I think that this is such an interesting question. And, what we can say is that our religious traditions are decentralized. That does not mean that there is no order. It does not mean that there is no ritual protocol, but it does mean that there isn't one way of serving the spirits. Chaque moun gen façon pa yo pou servi lwa yo. Everyone has their own fashion of serving the spirits and serving the ancestors. So within our communities, within our Lakou, within our spiritual lineages, we have règlement, we have ritual protocol that we are taught to follow. I think that historically there's been many more descendants of Yoruba-derived religious traditions who have traveled to Nigeria either for formal initiation or for religious pilgrimage. That is also becoming more common today in Benin, which is very exciting. Benin has officially established January 10th, a very special day people know for Maman KOSANBA, whom I will not call out this way. But January 10th has been officially recognized as National Vodun Day in Benin. This is major. I don't know any other nation on the continent or in the African diaspora who has established a formal day to recognize this African ancestral heritage tradition. So rites of religious pilgrimage have begun in earnest, and more Vaudouisans, more Vaudouvi are beginning to travel to Benin. But that takes time and energy and resources. And so it's not something that everybody has the power to do. So I don't think that it's something that is required or expected, but if one has the opportunity to conduct religious pilgrimage, I think it's a powerful opportunity to do so. And that is true across the African diaspora and on the African continent. Dr. Hume, I see that a shared student, Relicia Andrews, has written. In Garifuna, we practice the philosophy of, oh, forgive me, I will perhaps mispronounce this, Aubun Amurunu, I for you and you for me, which is very similar to the concept of Lakou. I reflect on Lakou, and in leaving home, I find myself searching for my own Lakou in new soil. How do you, as women, femme-identifying individuals rooted in these interwoven traditions, embody indigeneity and sustain sacred community far from your birthlands, while still honoring the ancestral cords that tie you to the earth and to each other? How do we embody Lakou in praxis in spaces where coloniality is a foundation of education? Oh, can we get an eye board and an ashe for the question? Thank you, Relicia. This is a powerful one. I'm going to cede the floor to my big sisters first.
All right. There's so much in here. Oh my. You know, I'm always praxis is the how do we, let me go back to this question because it's quite how do you, it's layered, and you know, the sense of rooted in these interwoven traditions, embodied and sustaining. Part of it is the ways that there are different layers. There are different layers. Depending on how Lakou is experienced, right? So when we think about what of the land in the case of ancestral lands, or if I'm thinking about it principally as ancestral Lakou, part of it is in the domestic shrines that hold something from that land. And part of the daily practice is that whether it's soil, whether it's a plant that is part of the a medicinal plant. So for example, there's several plants that you find in Lacous across the region, regardless if you're in Grenada, in Haiti, in Jamaica, in Trinidad. There's certain plants that you would find on lands that hold the space as container. They're crotons, right? So crotons are what we call also Joseph coats, blood dragons or dragon blood. I know their local names, but Dracaena, I think, is the scientific name for it's a burgundy, it's a burgundy plant that has a wide leaf that comes to a point. So interestingly, some of the plants hold this burgundy color. Then medicinally, you have things like fever grass, you have mint or oregano. So there are certain what would be considered quote unquote herbs, but that we use medicinally, that would be part. And it's in recreating these satellites in the spaces that you occupy. And you could bring it into your domestic shrines or keep them on the outside if you have exterior shrines. But this idea of mentioning, even if there is a sense that, for me, I maintain my connection to family land, where ancestral lineage, through how they are called in my mojuba, in my prayers in the morning. So those who I recall, who are named, who are on those lands, get called to presence on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. As a practice that is also, I invite my daughters to join as well. So there is a sense that they recognize that while we are living in Barbados, our reach extends beyond this territory. So in that recognition, or auditorily through the mentioning, through the housing of something from that land on the shrine, through just the remembrance, through keeping. I remember, you know, one of the things my grandmother would say is that even though you may live elsewhere and go elsewhere, you must come back if you can, touch ground, eat fruit from the tree, water your plants. So those acts of recognizing that, you know, this is where you are rooted, even if you're living in Europe or living in Australia or living wherever, that you make it you make it your duty, if at all possible, to pay, to do a pilgrimage, to go back, to be in those spaces and recharge, re-energize, and feel that connection. One of the things, I had been studying, I was living in the States for a long time and hadn't been back to the family land. And my grandmother did not give me entry into the home. And she says, "You've been away from this land. We no longer know you. The spirits of this land don't no longer know you." And she required of me to wash all the tombs before I was actually able to lay my head in her bed that night. And so that idea of duty, of laboring, of finding ways that you reconnect, is some of the, you know, I know not all Lacous are accessible. right? So the idea is how, you know, in the mentioning of names, in photographs, in the things where you could bring them to your consciousness, bring the space to your consciousness, I think becomes an important task. I hope I'm answering the question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Second part of coloniality, we could get to that, but we
yeah.
could.
And I think all the things that you're saying, I'll try not to repeat myself. I find that more and more, even things that may seem quote unquote basic, I want to pass certain things to my son. So I will say probably about I don't know if it's some months ago or time, I felt the need that I needed to start a ritual where every day when I wake up, once I go outside, turn off the light, I will I will um, take some water and put 3 drops of water. And I explained to my son while I was doing that, even though I do not practice voodoo, I know voodoo is part of my culture as a Haitian woman. And I felt like this is something I needed to do. And I explained to him while I was doing that. I told him, I feel like I need to feel connected to my ancestors, and it's something before I go out. I need to feel grounded. I need to feel that connection. So I feel like rituals are important, and that's a reminder. I also believe as I'm walking, being connected to nature, I intentionally, and I had the luxury of choosing the place where I live. There's a lake, and I will see different type of animals. I will see water. I needed that. So I feel that those things are important. Prayers. I have asked some of you on this call at times to pray for me. Like, I believe in the power of prayers. I'm not talking about religion. I grew up Catholic. I was traumatized. I know a lot of us have been traumatized by this white religion, but I do believe in prayer. Language. At times, I need to speak Haitian Creole. And my son, I will say, is a heritage listener, except he speaks way more than he thinks. But every now and then, especially to flatter me, he will speak in Creole, and that gets to me, when he wants something. So I find those always. And then the food. At times, I want to eat yaka. I want to eat corn, my moulin, and avec zaboka, corn with avocado. So these are the different ways, and I believe we all have it in us, but we don't often take time to pay attention to how we are feeling, the people we encounter, the people who can be part of our Lakou. They may not necessarily look like us. I have an amazing colleague who's the one who encouraged me to apply and eventually got the job where I am. We met in 2005 in Senegal. And there was like this connection, and she took me under her wings. She has seen me to 3 different institutions and has continued. This is, a white colleague, a white American colleague who's in the same field. So initially, maybe she didn't look like she could be part of my close Lakou, but she is. So I think we also have to be open and follow our instinct. We will feel it, and it
Yes.
comes with time. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate these reflections offered, and I think it is a good opportunity actually to transition to another set of questions. Alô, Stella, como é? Thank you for joining. The question posed is, how can we pass these customs to our children in the diaspora? And so that's just so fitting because both of you spoke about what it means to take this set of spiritual traditions and also cultural traditions to the next generation. And here I am going to make an absolute proud plug. It's beyond shameless, about UMass Boston's Creole Institute. I cannot speak more highly of this institution that has been teaching Haitian Creole for almost 20 plus years. I have done this language immersion program 4 times. Like, when people ask me, ¿Cómo te apren Creole? UMass Boston's Creole Institute. I did it when I was 16, when I was 21, when I was 26, when I was in my early 30s. I'm going to stop counting there because I don't need you to know my age. I'm joking. It's important to recognize that I did this at different stages of my life because I recognized that I had arrived at a place where I felt a barrier. If we want to know what it means to pass on legacies of culture and tradition, teach our children our languages. I cannot tell you how many people I know who have not had an opportunity to go to Haiti. That was the greatest gift that my mother could have possibly given me. Hello, Mama Claudine, Mama KOSANBA, merci, Mama. That is the greatest gift she could have given me. Right now, we have entered into a new era. My child is 3, and I have not been able to take him home. And I weep often. Speaking about the Lakou in the personal and the intimate, I received a gift from a Tatsi Kawol, and it was like clothes. He's 3. She sent some clothes. It was so sweet. But there was one gift whose identity I couldn't figure out, and I unwrapped it, and it was a Jacmel carnival mask, and I burst into tears. I always thought that I would be able to bring my son to Jacmel, where I've spent so much time, where I have my own spiritual community, to grow up and experience the things that I experienced when my mom took me to Haiti every year, eating kenep and mango and kashima and getting stained and swimming in the seas. And I haven't been able to do that yet. And I refuse to believe that it will not happen. I refuse to believe that. I rebuke that. It will happen. We will be able to take our children to Haiti encore. I must believe that. And we must continue to believe that. But in the meanwhile, we teach them our songs, and we cook them our food, and we teach them our language. Because without those access points, they don't have a touchstone and a foundation upon which to stand. And so that means the patois, and that means the garifuna, and that means the langage, and that means the Powell Gamoon, you know. And as many times as I've taken these language classes, I would never deign to say that I am fluent in Creole because I realize that Powell Gamoon, those proverbs and those riddles and the way of the elders who speak with connaissance and with deep knowledge, it surpasses me, you know. And that's why we must keep learning and keep striving, you know, to understand more within what is fitting for our soul journeys. I think that that's enormously important in terms of passing it on to the next generation. We have to teach them, you know, to be proud of these traditions, to claim this heritage, even as members of diaspora and as members of diaspora in different nations, you know. Yeah. Dr. Marc Prou, an inspiring Haitian linguist, indeed, who is the founder of the Haitian Creole Institute at UMass Boston. Somebody asked about the essence and the importance of labor, which I feel like we've discussed, but any additional thoughts that we want to offer there?
I think I would just say that labor, when we think about embodiment, and that inhabiting land is not a passive thing, it's not, or inhabiting a Lakou is something that one embodies, and that embodiment expresses itself in different ways. In many ways, labor could also be seen as service, the service to each other, the service to the divine, the service to self. That labor, there's sacred labor, there is collective labor, there is manual labor, there's all that. Labor is really an expansive concept that allows us to recognize the centrality of the body and how the body teaches us in community with each other and with the land itself. or with the space of which we are laboring. Yeah.
And I think also how we give our time. I mean, we are also busy when I think of labor, when we choose to give our time, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, that is so powerful. Sometimes people may take that for granted. And I know I've been in situation where I can be mentoring a student and they're interested in MOV, and I call upon Kira and I say, I need you to talk to that student. That is such a gift because I'm paying it forward, she's paying it forward. And I feel like sometimes people don't understand enough. Even us being here, all the volunteers of HSA who's giving of their time to make sure this takes place, the resources, both in terms of time and the financial resources it takes to run HSA as a volunteer-based organization, I feel at times people take that for granted. And I would like to make a plug. They want to see, oh, okay, people sometimes think these things happen out of thin air, just by magic. You may not be able to give money, but your time is just, or sometimes for some people, even more valuable. So I think of these when I think of labor also.
Mhm.
Hi, Bobo.
Well, yeah. Is that good?
Oh, we're getting to that time. It is 6:59, and I know that as Dr. Axilia has mentioned, our time is precious, our time is sacred. I want to offer my thanks and my deep gratitude for being in conversation with these these femmes vaillantes. For those of you who are not familiar with those expressions, I hope that the fist pounding has enough emphasis for you to know that the translation is fierce women, powerhouses, lighthouses. It has been such an honor. And I want to give tremendous thanks to the invitation to Dr. Irene Buisson,
Yes.
to Dr. Dasha Chapman, to Jessica Shu, to those behind the scenes. I want to give thanks to Messi en Pile for our translators. I know that we tried to speak more slowly, but sometimes we got excited. I want to thank HSA for extending the invitation to us as president and as co-vice president of KOSANBA, the Scholarly Association for the Study of Haitian Vodou, to enter into dialogue. You are looking here at leaders of two organizations that are indeed volunteer-based. And so we welcome you to explore the resources offered by the Haitian Studies Association. And I know when I see the floor, they'll share with you some of the exciting events that are coming up on the horizon. So I'll see the floor in just a moment to have them share that with you. From my perspective, I want to say thank you all so much. Follow us on all the things on Instagram and on YouTube and on Facebook. I'll drop some links here. I know that people have been dropping links thus far. So we give thanks to all of you for sharing so generously of your time. As my beloved sister and Marasaya Funaya will say, that is a non-renewable resource. Time is indeed something that is not renewed in the same way as other resources. So we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continuing these conversations. Yaya Yannick and Tati Cecile, do you want to offer any closing words?
I just want to say thank you behind the scene. I realize we stand on the shoulders and back and feet of people like Claudine Michel, longtime executive president, Geddes Fleurant, Patrick Bellegarde-Smith, and all the various former presidents who are here. I think I saw, I don't know if I saw Marie-Josée Nzengutayo, but I just want to say sometimes I never want to take for granted. I am here because of those people, and I just want to acknowledge that and say merci en pile.
Yes, indeed. Acknowledging all that who are here and acknowledging those who are not here with us physically and who are able to who've paved the way, paved the way for us to be here in conversation. So much thanks to you all, from the deepest part of all of us. Yeah.